Hey guys, tonight we begin with a topic a little less philosophical and a lot more greasy: medieval junk food. Yes, even in a world without fast food chains or vending machines, people still found ways to snack. Some of it was delicious, some disturbing, and all of it deeply medieval. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, and let's ease into tonight's journey. In a world where most snacks looked suspicious, apple fritters were a rare win. These golden pucks were the closest thing to a medieval donut. They used small, tart apples chopped and tossed in a batter of flour, eggs, and sometimes ale. They were deep fried in pig fat that was reused until it could probably vote. If you were rich, they were dusted with imported sugar. Otherwise, a drizzle of honey did the trick. If fritters were the donuts, cheese curds were the medieval popcorn. They were baby cheese, the fresh bits before the wheel hardened. They were slightly squeaky, rubbery, and wildly inconsistent. They were portable, filling, and comforting. The friend who always shows up but never overperforms. Turnips are not dessert, but in the medieval world, creative desperation made someone think, what if this were pie? Mashed turnips were blended with honey or dried fruit and baked in a sturdy crust. At best, it was like a root vegetable pudding. At worst, it tasted like livestock feed. The meat pasty was the medieval hot pocket. It was a handheld pie stuffed with seasoned meat, pork or mutton for the lucky, or rabbit, pigeon, eel, or even hedgehog for others. The crust was often thick on one edge, so it could be held with dirty hands and then tossed away to rats or spirits. In a world where brushing your teeth meant rinsing with wine, candied fennel seeds were the closest thing to breath mints. These seeds were coated in a hard shell of sugar. They were a dental hazard. You had to bite down slowly to make sure you didn't crack a molar. Unexpectedly delightful, these were crispy, salty strips of fried fish skin. They were efficient, waste not, want not, and tasted like concentrated ocean. The only drawback was the smell. Frying them would make your house smell like Poseidon's laundry for a week. The original comfort food: stale bread dunked in a bowl of flat, low-alcohol ale. The bread absorbed the liquid like a sponge with truss tissues. It was warm, bready, and a way to stretch ingredients that were starting to turn. A more refined version for the upper class. Toasted bread was dunked in mulled, spiced wine. It was a spoonable delicacy served at banquets when no one wanted to talk about politics. Dreams were divine telegrams. Professional dream interpreters, Baru priests, used manuals like the Ishkar Zakiku to decode visions. Dreaming of eating dates was good. Dreaming of teeth falling out meant a death in the family. Dreams were messages from gods or ancestors. The Ramesside Dream Book listed hundreds of scenarios. If you saw yourself eating crocodile flesh, it meant you would become a high official. Dreams were clinical appointments. People practiced incubation, sleeping in temples of Asclepius to receive a healing vision. Greek physicians like Hippocrates even used dreams for medical diagnoses. The Old Testament, Joseph, Roman generals, and Alexander the Great all relied on prophetic dreams to justify power and predict the future of nations. Ancient dream interpretation influenced the Middle Ages, Islamic mysticism, and eventually modern psychology, Freud and Jung. In 1860, California felt isolated. Mail took weeks via ship or stagecoach. The Pony Express was a bold solution to connect East and West in just 10 days. In a world where brushing your teeth meant rinsing with wine, candied fennel seeds were the closest thing to breath mints. These seeds were coated in a hard shell of sugar. They were a dental hazard. You had to bite down slowly to make sure you didn't crack a molar. Unexpectedly delightful, these were crispy, salty strips of fried fish skin. They were efficient, waste not, want not, and tasted like concentrated ocean. The only drawback was the smell. Frying them would make your house smell like Poseidon's laundry for a week. The original comfort food: stale bread dunked in a bowl of flat, low-alcohol ale. The bread absorbed the liquid like a sponge with truss tissues. It was warm, bready, and a way to stretch ingredients that were starting to turn. A more refined version for the upper class. Toasted bread was dunked in mulled, spiced wine. It was a spoonable delicacy served at banquets when no one wanted to talk about politics. Dreams were divine telegrams. Professional dream interpreters, Varu priests, used manuals like the Ishkar Zakiku to decode visions. Dreaming of eating dates was good. Dreaming of teeth falling out meant a death in the family. Dreams were messages from gods or ancestors. The Ramesside Dream Book listed hundreds of scenarios. If you saw yourself eating crocodile flesh, it meant you would become a high official. Dreams were clinical appointments. People practiced incubation, sleeping in temples of Asclepius to receive a healing vision. Greek physicians like Hippocrates even used dreams for medical diagnoses. The Old Testament, Joseph, Roman generals, and Alexander the Great all relied on prophetic dreams to justify power and predict the future of nations. Ancient dream interpretation influenced the Middle Ages, Islamic mysticism, and eventually modern psychology, Freud and Jung. In 1860, California felt isolated. Mail took weeks via ship or stagecoach. The Pony Express was a bold solution to connect east and west in just 10 days. Animal. But hey, it worked. The curds were pressed, lightly salted, and then that was it. Cheese curds. Sometimes they were soft, sometimes rubbery, sometimes they squeaked on your cheek like they had a personality. But they were filling, portable, and weirdly satisfying. And in a time where snack usually meant old bread or cold broth, curds felt like a win. Monks loved them, travelers packed them, kids would eat them like candy, assuming the cows had been cooperative that week. You could fry them, crumble them over stews, or just eat them by the handful while pretending not to smell like the inside of a barn. Unlike many medieval foods, cheese curds didn't require a celebration or feast. They weren't saved for holidays or saints' days. They were just there, comforting, familiar, mildly chewy. The friend who always shows up, never overperforms, but is weirdly reliable when everything else falls apart. Did they sometimes taste a little off? Sure, freshness was a spectrum in the Middle Ages, but with enough salt and enthusiasm, most people didn't complain. Besides, in a world without refrigeration, your standards naturally adjust. So no, cheese curds weren't glamorous, but they were simple, hearty, and just indulgent enough to count as a treat. In a pinch, they were also excellent for bribing cats and small children. Turnips are not dessert. Let's just start there. But in the medieval world, where sugar was expensive, apples weren't always in season, and creative desperation was a major food group, someone somewhere looked at a turnip and thought, what if this were pie? And so the turnip pie was born. Now, to be fair, it wasn't always awful. Sometimes it was even kind of good. Think mashed turnips, hopefully tender, blended with a bit of egg, maybe some honey or dried fruit if the cook was feeling generous, then baked inside a sturdy crust made of flour, water, and ambition. The result? Surprisingly edible. At best, it was warm, a little sweet, and had that vaguely comforting root vegetable meets pudding vibe. At worst, it tasted like someone had mistaken livestock feed for a baking ingredient and just rolled with it. Turnip pies were popular for two main reasons. Turnips were cheap, and pie crust could hide a multitude of sins. Whether the turnips were overripe, undercooked, or suspiciously bitter, once you baked them into a pie and added a drizzle of honey, it became peasant cuisine with aspirations. Was it cheesecake? No, but it tried, and in medieval Europe, trying counted for a lot. You'd find these pies at fairs, feast tables, and in particularly enthusiastic monasteries where the monks had a little too much time and a lot of extra root vegetables. Some recipes added spices, nutmeg if the abbey was rich, pepper if the cook was chaotic. Occasionally, raisins made an appearance, which only confused people further. Nobles didn't eat turnip pie unless they were slumming it for fun or pretending to relate to the common folk for political reasons. But for everyone else, it was dessert. Sort of. More like an afterthought with pastry. And yet, despite its questionable logic, the turnip pie endured. People liked it, or at least they didn't dislike it enough to stop making it. It was cheap, filling, and mildly sweet, which for medieval food made it basically revolutionary. If the medieval world had a comfort food MVP, it was the meat pasty, a handheld pie stuffed with seasoned meat, tucked into a folded crust and baked until it was golden brown or slightly scorched. Basically a medieval Hot Pocket, minus the microwave, and plus a genuine sense of danger. The beauty of the pasty was its portability. You could eat it on the road, in the fields, or while watching a public execution, whatever the day demanded. Wrapped in a thick pastry crust, it stayed warm for a while and protected the contents from dirt, rats, and the occasional peasant sneeze. But let's talk about that filling. Meat in this case was a flexible term. If you lived near a manor or a hunting estate, you might get pork, mutton, or venison, actual recognizable meat. If not, well, options expanded dramatically. Rabbit, pigeon, eel, hedgehog. Anything that once had legs or slithered could be diced, seasoned, and hidden inside pastry with plausible deniability. Spices were often used to enhance flavor, or more realistically, to distract you from it. Pepper, sage, and garlic helped, but they couldn't completely hide the fact that the meat had been resting for a few days longer than it should have. Still, in a time when refrigeration was a fantasy and lunch was often just bread and onions, a meaty pasty felt indulgent. There were even vegetarian versions filled with root vegetables, leeks, or cheese for fasting days or the particularly devout. But make no mistake, the meat ones were the crowd pleasers. They were greasy, hot, and comforting. You didn't ask what was inside, you just ate it and hoped the cook had been in a good mood. And in case you're wondering, yes, people sometimes marked the crust with initials or symbols to claim ownership, especially among miners and laborers. Bereavements. Tiny, sugary, and vaguely herbal, they were part treat, part digestive aid, and part dental hazard, all wrapped up in a single, oddly satisfying crunch. These little seeds were typically coated in a hard shell of sugar, which was no small feat. In the Middle Ages, sugar had to be imported, boiled, beaten, and poured by hand, meaning someone, somewhere, really believed in the potential of these tiny snacks. They were especially popular in noble households, where guests might be handed a small dish of them after dinner to freshen the mouth and probably to distract from the mutton still clinging to their molars. Flavor-wise, fennel seeds had a strong, licorice-like bite. You either loved them or politely swallowed them whole and nodded in gratitude. The sugar coating helped, but there was always that unmistakable herbal kick, the kind of thing that makes you feel both fancy and slightly confused. Candied seeds also had a job to do: digestion. People believed fennel helped settle the stomach, especially after a heavy meal involving 3 types of bird and an alarming amount of meat. Think of them as the medieval version of chewing gum crossed with Tums, but with more potential to chip a tooth. And yes, they were hard. Like crack your molar if you're too confident. Hard. You didn't chew candied fennel seeds casually. You tested one first, gently, bit down, slowly listened for cracking sounds, then committed. It was a risk-reward situation every time. While the rich popped them like medieval Tic Tacs, common folk occasionally got their hands on knockoff versions, usually involving honey, crushed herbs, and vague optimism. Not quite the same, but good enough to pretend. In the grand lineup of medieval junk food, candied fennel seeds were small but mighty. They didn't fill your belly, but they left a pleasant taste in your mouth and gave the illusion of refinement, even if you were covered in mud and still had goose grease on your tunic. If medieval desserts had a golden child, it was the honey cake. Sweet, dense, and prone to sticking to everything except your expectations. Honey cakes were what happened when bakers got ambitious and sugar was still locked in a castle treasury. Honey was the sweetener of the people, assuming those people had bees, access to bees, or weren't afraid of climbing trees and getting stung in the face. These cakes were usually made with flour, water, and generous spoonfuls of honey, or at least what passed for spoonfuls in an era where spoons were mostly used to fight off siblings. The result? A firm, chewy slab that could either be a delightful snack or a makeshift doorstop, depending on how long it had been sitting near the hearth. Spices were sometimes added if the household was feeling wealthy or showing off. Nutmeg, cloves, or cinnamon could give the honey cake a bit of flair. And by flair, we mean the ability to cause an entire village to talk about your recipe for a week. Dried fruits were also tossed in if they hadn't been stolen by the local children or turned into wine. Honey cakes were popular at feasts, festivals, and weddings, mostly because they could be made ahead of time, didn't spoil quickly, and could survive being dropped on the ground, stepped on, or thrown at someone in a mild food fight. They were also used as gifts, bribes, and occasionally passive-aggressive statements. Here, I made this for you. It's sweet, unlike your personality. Structurally, they weren't what you'd call delicate. Many resembled compact bricks. Slicing them required a sturdy knife, and the feasts, festivals, and weddings, mostly because they could be made ahead of time, didn't spoil quickly, and could survive being dropped on the ground, stepped on, or thrown at someone in a mild food fight. They were also used as gifts, bribes, and occasionally passive-aggressive statements. Here, I made this for you. It's sweet, unlike your personality. Structurally, they weren't what you'd call delicate. Many resembled compact bricks. Slicing them required a sturdy knife and the hot fat later, and history was made, or at least something vaguely edible was born. Fish skin was plentiful, especially in coastal towns or near rivers where herring, cod, or whatever had been pulled out of the water was processed on site. The meat went to the stew pot, the heads went to the cat, and the skin, that got thrown into a pan of bubbling oil and sizzled into submission. The result was surprisingly addictive, a thin, crispy snack that crunched like a dried leaf but tasted like concentrated ocean. A pinch of salt elevated the experience. A hint of garlic or herbs, well, now you were flirting with culinary excellence. These cracklings weren't just tasty, they were practical, lightweight, non-perishable-ish, and high in fat. Exactly what a medieval body craved after a day of hauling firewood or defending sheep from someone else's sheep. Soldiers packed them, sailors lived off them, peasants sold them outside taverns for a few coins, and the satisfaction of feeding drunk people something louder. You stale bread and warm beer, you didn't cry. You made the most medieval snack imaginable. Bread soaked in ale. Known variously as soups or trench toast, this humble creation was the original comfort food. Think French toast but without the eggs, sugar, cinnamon, or joy. Here's how it worked. You took yesterday's bread, the kind that could double as building material, and dunked it into a bowl of ale. Not fancy craft ale with notes of citrus and a hoppy finish. No, this was flat, low-alcohol medieval ale brewed in someone's smoky back room with the hygiene standards of a barn owl. The bread absorbed the ale like a sponge with trust issues. It softened, swelled, and transformed from a jawbreaker into something vaguely edible. Was it tasty? In the right light, with a good mood and low expectations? Yes, kind of. It was warm, bready, and carried the gentle bitterness of fermented grain, which is to say, it didn't actively offend the palate. This snack was especially popular with the working class, people who didn't have time for multiple courses or cutlery, but still needed calories that wouldn't fight back. Bread soaked in ale was quick, hearty, and just messy enough to feel like a real break from your daily chores. Sometimes people added extras, a sprinkle of herbs, a bit of cheese, or a fried egg if the hen felt generous that morning. On feast days, you might even get soaps soaked in spiced ale, which basically meant the cook found a nutmeg shaving somewhere and got inspired. And like many medieval dishes, this one had dual purpose. Not only was it food, it was also a way to stretch ingredients. Bread too stale to chew? Just soak it. Ale starting to turn? Pour it on bread and pretend it's intentional. Waste was for amateurs. The only downside, it didn't travel well. Once soaked, the bread turned into a kind of sloshy porridge cube. Eat it quickly or risk ending up with a mushy sponge in your bowl and a 1,000-year-old food metaphor for disappointment. Still, for a chilly evening by the fire, nothing beat a slice of ale bread mush and a moment of peace. If you've ever looked at a slice of bread and thought, this would be better submerged in alcohol? Congratulations! You and the medieval upper class have something in common. Soaps and wine were one of the more refined, bizarrely specific snacks of the Middle Ages. A dessert, technically, or perhaps an experience. The concept was simple. Take bread, ideally toasted, or at least not completely stale, and dunk it in wine. Banquets, late-night feasts, and the kind of awkward dinner where no one wanted to talk about politics, so instead they passed around soggy toast in a goblet. When done well, soaps and wine were warm, comforting, and mildly intoxicating, a gentle end to a heavy meal. The wine added richness, the bread gave texture, and the spices made you feel like you were part of something fancier than it was. When done poorly, it was wet bread in a bowl. No amount of cinnamon could cover up the feeling that you were chewing on a medieval mistake. Sometimes dried fruits or nuts were added for flair, sometimes cheese, occasionally a whole egg. At that point, it stopped being a snack and became a culinary guessing game. Peasants made their own versions, usually using cheap vinegar or ale instead of wine. It wasn't dessert, it was dinner, or breakfast, or whatever you could call a meal that made you both full and confused. Still, soaps and wine had staying power. They were warm, they were filling, and they gave medieval people a taste of indulgence, even if it did taste like sponge soaked in mold regret. In the Middle Ages, dried fruit was a prized treat. Sugary, exotic, and shelf-stable enough to survive an entire crusade. But let's be clear, this wasn't your modern trail mix with cute, resealable packaging. Medieval dried fruit had one job: to last. Taste was optional. Texture, aggressively chewy. Dental damage, practically a guarantee. Let's start with the basics. You had your usual suspects: raisins, figs, dates, and if you were really fancy, imported prunes. These were like fighting your own jaw muscles. Figs came with seeds that doubled as medieval dental floss. Dates were sticky enough to glue your molars together. Raisins stuck in your teeth for hours. There was no such thing as snacking quietly. Still, dried fruit had its moments. It was used in pies, added to porridge, or chopped up and thrown into honey cakes to create the illusion of variety. Rich folks might wrap them in pastry, drizzle them with rose water, or soak them in wine like they were trying to inject. You ate 2, you could skip lunch. If you ate 4, you were probably a blacksmith or trying to win a dare. These snacks were common at fairs, markets, and roadside stalls where everything smelled like livestock and ambition. They were especially popular in colder months because what warms the soul like fried coagulation? Of course, blood pudding balls weren't for everyone. Some folks didn't love the texture, others didn't love the concept. But in a world where survival came first and flavor came somewhere around 12, these meaty little morsels earned their place in the medieval junk food hall of fame. Forget everything you know about pancakes. These weren't fluffy stacks with maple syrup and whipped cream. Medieval pancakes were thinner, tougher, and cooked in enough lard to make your arteries consider early retirement. But they got the job done. And in a world where your other breakfast option was thin soup that's sad about its life, they were kind of a treat. Made from a humble mix of flour, eggs, and water, a spoonful of honey, luxurious. A sprinkle of herbs or onions, adventurous, but most of the time it was just pancake and grease, served hot and inhaled like you just run from a tax collector. These pancakes were democratic. Everyone ate them. Peasants, nobles, monks, merchants. Some layered them with cheese, some dunked them in broth, and others just rolled them up and called it a day. You could eat them sweet, savory, or scorched beyond recognition. And if you had leftovers, stack them up and pretend they were cake or armor. They were especially popular during Lent and other fasting days when meat was off limits. Pancakes became a loophole. Fried, filling, and somehow both humble and indulgent. Plus, they made excellent vessels for disguising other ingredients that had no business being in your mouth. And while they might not have been beautiful, medieval pancakes had staying power. They didn't need praise, they just needed a hot pan and a willing stomach. Somewhere between a snack and a sacrament, we find the medieval wafer, a thin, crisp, suspiciously light biscuit that danced the line between dessert and dental challenge. Wafers were everywhere, outside churches, at village fairs, in the hands of monks, and occasionally floating in your soup like a flat holy crouton. Let's clarify. We're not talking about chocolate-dipped, cream-filled delights. Medieval wafers were made of flour, water, eggs, and not much else. If you were feeling fancy, you could add a dash of honey or rose water, but most stuck with the basics. Thin, crisp, suspiciously light biscuit that danced the line between dessert and dental challenge. Wafers were popular because they were portable, fast to make, and best of all, they could be sold in massive quantities for a tidy profit. Vendors would set up outside churches on feast days, waving stacks of warm wafers at the faithful as they left Mass. Buy now, sin later was not a challenge, transporting them even more so, which made eating them outdoors a high-stakes affair involving crumbs, wind, and regret. Still, they were beloved, light, crispy, and vaguely celebratory. Wafers were the medieval version of treating yourself without completely wrecking your digestion or your wallet. For nobles, they came stacked with fruit or layered with soft cheese. For everyone else, they were sold by the dozen in street stalls and eaten immediately before they disintegrated into edible confetti. Sucket was one of the few medieval snacks that genuinely felt like dessert. It was rich, refined, and just extravagant enough to make up for the fact that dinner had included boiled something. Ah, fried eel, the grand finale of medieval junk food. A dish so strangely beloved, it made its way from peasant hearths to royal banquets without once stopping to ask, wait, am I really the best option here? Yes it was. Eel was everywhere in medieval Europe. Rivers and streams practically writhed with them, and they were like wrestling a wet rope that didn't want to die. Once subdued, the eels were chopped, seasoned if you were feeling bold, and tossed into hot fat until the skin crisped up and the meat firmed into something vaguely appealing. The finished product? A crunchy, savory bite with a rich, slightly oily flavor, like if calamari and chicken had an identity crisis in a tavern kitchen. Fried eel was served at fairs, feasts, roadside inns, and, believe it or not, during religious fasts. That's right, eel. Like you were living a little too dangerously for a Wednesday afternoon. Today, it might seem bizarre. Back then, it was a delicacy, a slippery little miracle that kept bellies full and menus weird. In the ancient world, Mesopotamia stood at the crossroads of mystery and mythology, and nowhere was this more evident than in how they viewed dreams. To the Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians, a dream wasn't just a private, meaningless experience. It was a divine telegram, a supernatural email, like you were living a little too dangerously for a Wednesday afternoon. Today, it might seem bizarre. Back then, it was a delicacy, a slippery little miracle that kept bellies full and menus weird. In the ancient world, Mesopotamia stood at the crossroads of mystery and mythology, and nowhere was this more evident than in how they viewed dreams. To the Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians, a dream wasn't just a private, meaningless experience. It was a divine telegram, a supernatural email. Dreaming of sex with a goddess? Well, congrats! You're either divinely favored or cursed with arrogance. These dream books didn't claim to guess meanings. They presented cause and effect, as if dreams were equations. A equals B. See a snake? Expect betrayal. Fall from a rooftop? A lawsuit is coming. The world of dreams was logical, just operating on divine logic, which was far stranger than human reason. But the Mesopotamians didn't stop at interpretation. They practiced dream incubation too. If a ruler wanted guidance from the gods, he might sleep in a temple under special circumstances, fasting, cleansing rituals, perhaps a few incense offerings, and wait for a revelatory dream. The idea was that certain environments made the divine connection stronger, clearer, and less prone to nightmares about drunk goats. For Mesopotamians, the dream world was not a mystery to solve. It was a realm to navigate with caution, reverence, and a very large clay tablet library. They believed the gods were always speaking, You just had to be